Welcome, everybody, to Ghost Light. This is a podcast at the intersection of creative entrepreneurship and the performing arts, and I am thrilled to welcome my guest today, Josh Innerst. Josh, welcome.
Hi, thanks for having me back.
That is a fantastic mustache you were sporting there, my friend. If you were listening, I would highly recommend that you stop and go over to the video version of this podcast so that you can fully appreciate the mustache that Josh Innerst has right now. And you have that because you are in a play at the moment, yes?
Yeah, I'm doing Three Musketeers down at Barter Theater, and they let me grow my stuff out and keep it, which has been nice.
Fantastic. And tell me a little bit about that run.
We have been open for just about a week, maybe a week and a half, and we run through the first week of April. I think we close Saturday. Was that the 4th?
And the Barter Theater, right?
Yeah, Barter Theater in Abingdon, Virginia. Yep. Been fun. It's been a good contract. I really enjoyed it. Yeah.
Well, tell me a little bit about the show.
Well, this is the second time I've done this adaptation. This is Kathy Bush's adaptation. And I did it up in Cleveland about maybe 3 years ago with Rod Kinter, who's a fight director, and Sean Campos, who is one of the company members here at Barter. And they reached out to see if I wanted to come back, and Sean and I switched roles. So the last time I did it, I was the villain, Rochefort, and he was Athos, and this time I'm Athos and he's Rochefort. But Rod Kinter came back to do fights, which has been great to work with him. He's kind of like a dream fight choreographer, and he's been doing it. It's interesting. They're very, very different productions, with the same story. So it's been interesting.
So do you like playing the villain or do you like playing the hero?
Yeah, it's funny. I usually prefer playing the villain just because it's often more fun. But this one's nice because I'm not really the hero either. It's D'Artagnan's story more than anything. I just get to kind of support his journey and his kind of story throughout. So that's where I'm comfortable, is, playing B to an interesting A.
And how long did it take you guys to rehearse the fights?
Oh man, fights. We got really, really lucky with this one. So the contract, just the way it fell out with the dates. They have a playwriting festival here, the Appalachian Playwriting Festival, that happens every year, and they do like amazing plays come out of this festival, and that was happening during our first week of rehearsals, and so we actually kind of got brought in a week early to participate in the play reading a bit, but also that entire first week, we only did fights. We didn't even have a read through until well into our second week of rehearsal. So we got a huge head start on the fights, which is my great. And we worked those suckers up until we opened. Rod is he's a really precise fight director, and he's very, very story driven. And so the fights were complicated, but they look great and they tell a great story. So, yeah.
Well, that's a perfect segue. I wanted to get into telling a great story. As a professional storyteller, what are some of the things that come to mind for you when you think of how to tell great stories?
Geez, that's a big, good question. I think for me, the first thing that comes to mind is whatever is going to immediately resonate with your audience. I mean, anything can be a story, or you can find an interesting story in anything. It's just a question of whether you as an ensemble are going to be able to translate that interesting story to an audience, and whether it'll resonate with them.
Yeah. Yeah. And who you're telling the story for and who you're telling the story to is so important, right?
Yeah, I think it's especially important in the regions and for regional theater companies, because very often the temptation is to try to do what's hot in New York or LA or Chicago. It's what's hot in the cities. And that might work, but very often you find, I look at a company like Barter, where I'm at right now, Katie Brown, who runs this and who directed our show. We've had interesting conversations about, like, she takes her job of entertaining this local audience very seriously, and I think that's always, especially in regional theater, that's such a challenge because you want to be plugged in and engaged with your industry and what's hot, but you have a responsibility, not even a responsibility, you have an economic incentive to represent and to entertain the people who live where you are doing the work. And that's an interesting little line that they get to tread here that I think they do a really good job at.
How do you see that manifesting at Barter? The connecting with the local audience and engaging with them.
I think it partly is their season at this company. They have a huge season that they do a lot of plays and a wide variety. So they do a lot of crowd pleaser plays. Like this last year, they did Elf and The Grinch it did really well for them economically, that they then are able to pour that kind of an influx into the work. So we were able to have, for instance, a larger company from Musketeers they were able to bring in some more fighters and a stunt guy to work on the show because of that successful season. And they'll do things like, we were just having a conversation in the dressing room a couple of years ago. They did The Shawshank Redemption, the play. It's a straight play. And it did well enough for them with audiences who don't usually come to the theater. So your guys who aren't all that interested maybe in coming to see Much Ado About Nothing, they might not be interested in coming to see Guys and Dolls, but they came to see Shawshank Redemption, and now they're coming back to see A Few Good Men or to see, what have you. That's one of the big ones, I think, in terms of programming. But also, this company is lucky. They have a resident company here, which, this is my personal soapbox, that every regional theater needs to return to that system. It works at this company, and I feel it every time I'm on stage. And, Sean Campos or, any one of the company members come onto the stage. You can feel it in the audience. It's funny, I got my second week of rehearsals here, I got really, really sick, just like allergies and stuff, and I wasn't taking care of myself, and I had to go to emergency care or urgent care to get some meds. And my nurse was a local guy, probably in his 60s. And when he found out I was with Barter, he got so excited because he's just like a, good old country boy from around this area. And he now comes every year to see not what they've programmed. He's not coming because he's interested in the playwrights or the stories. He is coming to see Sean Campos in whatever role he's playing. And he now, after X number of seasons of doing this, his sister travels in from out of state. His whole family comes. And that's like 10 regular tickets each year they can depend on, not because of the hot show they picked, but because their local audience is loyal and wants to see their resident company members on stage. It doesn't matter if he's playing the Grinch or if he's playing Nicely Nicely, right? They want to come see that. So I think that's one of the big things that most regional theaters that started with resident companies have disbanded their companies and consequently have suffered financially, not necessarily directly because of that. Whereas this company is financially, they're doing pretty, I would say, better than any company I've ever seen. And one of the things that make them unique is they've kept their resident company.
What is it like coming from the outside and working with artists who are in residence? Do you feel like the work is stronger because of that foundation, or is it harder because you don't know how they work?
Sure. Yeah. No, I see what you mean. I definitely do think it's stronger, but I'm also very much a very biased observer just because, you and I had the benefit of working together in a resident company. And I know firsthand how much it cuts your rehearsal time to have a shorthand already established, and to already have relationships established. This was interesting because this might be my first time joining a company as a guest artist that has a resident. Well, no, I guess when I first started acting at Milwaukee Rep, they had one, but luckily for me, I already knew some of the members of the company. I'd worked with them before, And this company in particular was very welcoming. Like there was no ego about like the new guy in the room. They were very kind of just plug right into the process. Yeah. And we also, I will say, we benefited from that whole first week of fight rehearsals that we had before we started working on the text. By the time we got to table work, we already knew each other. Like it was like we had formed our own little secondary resident company that we all were able to have a week literally sweating and fighting and bleeding with each other before we started work. So kind of had like best of both worlds there.
So, from someone who's working with the company and who's observed sort of their financial strength, what do you think some of the things are that Bards is doing that maybe some other theaters might learn from? Oh, like, what are you seeing from the inside?
I think the first thing that comes to mind is that they are they are doing a good job of educating and entertaining their audience. So they have this great new playwrights festival. They also have a secondary festival that specifically engages with members of the BIPOC community in this area and how we can heighten their stories that often, to be honest, having worked and lived in this area for a long time before, is overlooked. That is laying the foundation for future audience members. It's not just checking off a box for a board. It's laying your foundation for future audience members and future team players on stage. They also have a really good balance of usually the spring slot is some sort of student appealing show, right? Whether it's classical canon like Shakespeare or Musketeers. So we can rely pretty heavily on a large student matinee turnout. And then they run in rep. Like once their summer season starts, they're a true rep company. They have 2 spaces with 2 different companies that are running a rotating rep, which appeals to people who are going to travel to the area to see more than one show. They're going to see multiple shows. So there's all of that. But then they also, I know the conversations I've had with the development team, like they're really, really smart about how they get, I mean, donors, or you could think of them as investors, not only in the season as a whole, but also in show specific. So they have members of their development team who deal one-on-one with beyond, supporting the theater. Like, how can we get you engaged in a specific show so that their donors also are collaborators, right? They're not just checkbooks. They're engaging with specific artists. They have a voice in what a show might look like, how it's doing. And, we certainly benefit from that. For our Musketeers, every day we think we have an anonymous donor who partly made our show possible in collaboration with just their general season donors. And they made it possible to get, an amazing fight director like Rod Kinter. And I don't want to give too much away about the show for anybody who's interested in seeing it, but we have an amazingly theater tech savvy set that is part of the production and is as much of a character as the actors are in how it moves and engages the show. And all of that's possible with a really good development team who is on board. So those are all like, I think, things off the top of my head. I will say, in observation, I had a colleague came down and saw the shows, actually from American Shakespeare Center. Vanessa Morosco came down. And afterwards we were having a conversation and she said, she was like, the one thing that like I can tell just being in this theater is that this place just exudes joy. And it's like, that has been the entire process, following Katie Brown's leadership, both in running the way she runs the company, but also the way she ran rehearsals, is that it's like a no drama Obama rehearsal room. And the vibe at the company very much feels that way. It's a very joyful, supported company with 100% financial transparency from the top down. So yeah.
Wow. So 100% financial transparency.
Yeah. So actually right now they're having their quarterly finance meeting that they invite the company to, and they lay out, this is what we spent last quarter. This is what each show brought in. This is how we allocated that surplus. This is where we need to focus on moving forward. This is our projected goal for this season. And that kind of financial transparency is quite rare, I find, in companies, in theater companies, to include the artists. And by the artists, I don't just mean the actors. I mean the wardrobe, the dressers, the construction teams, the electricians. Everybody's invited to those, and it just it it tells the story to the company that you are valued not just for what you produce, but you're valued for your input, and you're valued enough for me to give you the information that this entire season is going to depend on. And I will say that is something that's unique. I've never seen that at a company before. Um, I'm sure it exists, I'm sure it does, but I've never crossed paths with that kind of transparency.
Yeah, I was thinking about this because uh, financial information always puts our guard up, right?
Mhm.
Like I thought about on the podcast, like, why don't I ask people like how much they earn? And something inside of me was like, "Ooh, you can't ask a question like that." People, and people I think would bristle at that kind of directness and that kind of you know, having that just be public and out there and public facing. I think is it feels like it's exposing us.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Especially in, I think, the way that we not only do art in America, but the way we equate worth and success directly to finance. It's hard to, I think, be open about that in the arts because it looks different.
Yeah.
Sometimes, not all the times, but sometimes. Yeah.
Josh, what would you change about the structure of the American theater if you were going to break it down and build it back up from scratch?
I mean, the big thing I would say, and this is not going to surprise you or anybody who's been listening, is bring back the resident company system. That's the first thing I'd say. It is still a mystery to me why it went away, in the way that it did go away. So that's the first thing I would say. But I think the arts scene, especially in America right now, we have such a crisis of lack of giving, in that, we've kind of economically returned to another Gilded Age in terms of who controls what money and who has access to it, but we don't teach charitable giving like we used to. It used to be a point of pride among the wealthy, just to be poignant, that they had companies, that they sponsored libraries and art museums, and they sponsored symphony orchestras, and they sponsored art companies and stuff, because we valued that. We valued live entertainment, and we don't teach that kind of, it's not even charity, I don't think. I think that's the wrong term. It's investment in your community. We don't teach that kind of value, um, for those who have. And it shows in kind of the way that theater companies are able to do work, when that support, when the system is built on that support and that support goes away. I mean, it would be wonderful if every company could be for profit and every company could 100% depend on ticket sales, but that's not the reality, and it's never been the reality.
Yeah, and the more that I investigate that question, the more I'm convinced that there probably is a mixture of earned and contributed revenue that is healthy, you know? Like you said, I think that when there's contributed revenue, that's providing a different kind of value to people, right? It's giving donors the opportunity to say, we care about this art form. We care about this company and the artists who are making it, and we want to see it continue, and we want to see the service continue to flourish and be given to, thinking about education programs and kids going to see shows and kids, learning music and um, dance and all that stuff, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's like, you look at also, I mean, for I think for a lot of people who they can't think of the benefits of donors. They can't think of of a company that is going to bring a plus to their community that is dependent on donors, that's dependent on charitable givings. But like this season that I'm doing right now, actually, this early spring season at Barter is a great example that they canceled it for a little while because it's not a huge ticket selling season for them. That they make the most of their ticket sales kind of in the summer fall repertory season, and then of course Christmas is always going to be a huge seller. And when they tried that, this local community came to them and basically said, please bring the spring season back. These businesses depend on foot traffic. Like all of the restaurants around here, all of the coffee shops, even for the student matinees, you have 400, we had 400 high school students in downtown today. All of those kids, as they're waiting to come in, stop by a coffee shop. There's a juice place across the street. They got, how much this local community depends on the revenue that this company brings in. When you look at it from that point, that is an investment. It's not just a write-off, right? It is investing in the success of your community. And I mean, we certainly experienced that in Stanton. I've seen that when we were at the ASC, and other communities during the pandemic noticed that all of these theater companies that had to shut down. So I think that's one of the biggest things that I'd change. And unfortunately, as an artist, I have no control over that. over that. But
Yeah, it's eh, being an actor can be difficult because you are such a piece of the equation, right? And the piece that you are a part of it's a part of the product, but so you're not involved in the other side of the administration. And I mean, it sounds like getting to go to a meeting like this is very out of the ordinary for you, business, the finance meeting. And I don't think it happens very many places. I had never been at a theater where I was told, you should come to the board meetings or you should come to our company meetings and discuss your ideas about where the company should go. And then you also feel disempowered because without all that structure, you can't do the thing that, you are best at doing.
yeah, yeah. I feel like, man, a career in this industry, it requires so much like trust in the universe that that something is gonna happen, and also like a spirit of being okay with whatever.
Hey, y'all. If you're enjoying this conversation, I want to invite you to be a part of what we're building. Stageable is exploring new economic models for performing arts. If that idea resonates with you, visit stageable.com and join the email list. That's where we'll share new conversations, ideas, and the progress of the project. And if you'd like to help more people discover Ghostlight, follow the show or leave a review on your favorite podcast app. Now, back to the conversation.
A spirit of being okay with whatever. I was just watching this great interview with Jerry O'Connell, the actor, and he was talking about how he's a face that I remember growing up watching him and stuff. And he is at a point in his career where he was like, I have no power. I have no agency in my own profession. I am 100% dependent, which it's one of those things that I think it's a lot harder when you're an A-lister or when you're working at that level, because you getting hired requires so much more investment. But watching it, I was like, yeah, it requires a certain amount of zen and a certain amount of the ability to either self-reflect or specifically not self-reflect, in order to sustain work in this industry. And I feel like a lot of people, I've certainly felt the benefit of branching away from it, not quite finding an exit strategy, but finding okay, I have no power as an actor. What are ways that I can find a little bit more agency? And whether that is working as an actor, diversifying my work as an actor in commercial VO work, which ironically are both areas that you have equally less power, or investment or entrepreneurship, like you've explored. It's a weird, it's a weird little life we lead, Benjamin.
Yeah, it really is. And that's probably one of the reasons why I started Stageable was to try and get some of that agency, at least I can contribute in some way, right? And I think that as I continue to kind of refine the idea and go back to the whiteboard and try again and think through it again, I keep kind of coming back to, as long as I can make some sort of incremental positive impact, then it's still worth it, right?
Yeah.
And I know that you can only eat an elephant one bite at a time. So just go back and try to make that one little change, that one little adjustment, and see kind of how it looks now, and then it's back to the same thing, right? It's just like these little tiny changes over time.
Well, as you start to get Stageable off the ground, and as you're getting kind of more movement with it, like what are some of those things, like you asked me, what if I could start a theater over again, if I could kind of hit reset, what are areas I would focus on? What's like one of those little bites that you're focused on with Stageable?
Yeah, Stageable is primarily focused on democratizing the process and leveling the playing field, and basically saying, let's let audiences decide what they value, and let's find an easy way for them to show their support, whether that's projects or whether it's specific niches within the performing arts, rather than having to have an entire company and structure and needing a physical space. Like, what if we could make live performance sustainable on a much smaller scale with an even higher impact, in that there's the ability to reach a global audience wherever they might be.
That's interesting, because like hearing that, the thing that pops in my mind is like, because I tend to hear it from a performer's perspective and how we democratize the work and how all kind of stuff. But like thinking of it from an audience perspective, like going back to like my goal of donorship and getting more charitable donors involved in the process, or whatever that looks like, is audiences do have the ability, it's not the right wording, but to sponsor or to patronize a specific artist. We often think that like donors and charitable giving is only for the super wealthy, with season subscriptions or large chunk donations or investments. But like as individual audience members, this gives them the option to say, what specifically is kind of like that nurse who comes to see Sean in shows here at Barter. What is Benjamin doing, and how can I either engage with it, support it, or share it? Makes them just as much of a donor as a multimillionaire dumping money into a company. It's just being allocated on an individual level or on a smaller, kind of more personal level. That's interesting.
I do think also there's this like, having businesses and having little kids really puts a lot of strain on your free time and your availability, as you
Sure.
can imagine. And so I often am not able to go and see plays because the ask is so large. It's a large amount of time. There's usually travel involved. I've got to get a babysitter. And so like it's logistically really difficult. It's a big ask. I think not even just if you have kids, but just for anybody. I mean, it's a big event getting out of the house and going somewhere and getting the ticket, the whole planning. And there's basically no other way to engage. And I think that's where I get a little frustrated, and where your point about supporting individual artists, like, I think we are not capitalizing on that in the theater industry or in the live performance industry, in that, I would pay to see a ticket of you perform a number of different roles. The problem is there's no offer on the table for me because, getting out to Abingdon right now at this point in my life is just too much of an ask, even though it is only, 3 hours away.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I hear that. That is, I was talking with an actor who has a specific audience member who like comes to see him in everything and brings him some like personalized gifts and support when they do. And he was saying that like at first it was he wasn't sure how to respond to it, and I was like, is that weird? And he was like, no. He said over time he's really come to value that person, and they now have a personal relationship, and they'll come and support him no matter what theater company he's working at. And like something like this would give them the agency and the ability to do that, whether he is on stage or whether he is sharing a podcast or just sharing what he's up to. Yeah, that is interesting.
I also just think, Josh, like imagine the kind of negotiating power that an actor would have if they were able to be like, well, I also bring an audience with me. I've got whatever 5,000 followers on Instagram, and usually about 25% of them purchase a digital ticket to see my work. Like then I feel like that now becomes a selling point, and it empowers the artist, which is there's Simon Sinek. Have you ever seen any of his work or read any of his books? He is a business coach. He had a TED Talk that went viral that is called Start With Why. And I think there's a book that he wrote subsequently about it. And the big line from that TED Talk was, at your company, people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it.
Oh,
And
sure. Yeah.
yeah. And so like what you communicate is not the product, it's not what you do, but you communicate the reason behind it. And then, you go through the whole exercise of sort of what is the purpose of your company, and what is your personal purpose. And I think my personal purpose feels very connected to that, is empower the artist. Like I think that's what really drives me. That's my why. And it might be connected to what we were talking about earlier with agency, and basically always feeling a lack of agency in the process. I've come to really enjoy any time I'm able to help any artist do their thing with consistency.
Sure.
So inviting bands to play at the Green Room and doing concerts there, or helping out. I love that the businesses will often partner with local theaters and purchase their advertisements and support them in that way. But anything I can do that empowers the artist and gives them a platform. And so, the company is very connected to my personal purpose and why.
Yeah. No, I love that. I like it, especially like looking at it. It's an interesting challenge bridging live entertainment with technology in a way that is compelling and interesting. And I feel like on one hand, there is like, yes, having good equipment, good lighting, having something that works on the screen that someone can engage with, but also just the idea of giving an audience or giving a supporter the agency to support and the direct connection. I had an interesting conversation with a producer who's like a big producer for Big Five publisher earlier this year at an audiobook convention, and her son is starting a musical theater program. And I kind of jokingly was like, how do you feel about that? Because, oftentimes parents, especially parents from production, don't necessarily support that. And she said, she was like, it's one of the first times she said, if you had asked me that question 10 years ago, I would have cautioned him and I would have said, go get your theater training, sure, but make sure you also get a background in production, because that's going to be more reliable as a paycheck than live performance. And she was like, now it's the first time maybe in history that as a parent, I would say, no, you need to go get your experience in live entertainment, because that's the thing that's not going away. Like AI can't do anything about that. AI can do a lot about the production side of it. So as like we see this weird flip that live entertainment skills, whether it's dance, acting, theater, musical theater, musicianship, becomes just as valuable, like we're seeing the trades become valuable again. It's interesting to find a way to like still open the technological door to give access and kind of agency in that regard.
I think the other thing that's really exciting to me is that your small professional theater company now has the ability to compete with Hollywood level distribution. And that has never been the case before. And I understand that, you know, watching a play through a television screen or through a computer is not, it's never going to be as valuable of an experience as going in and being in the same space, right? It's inherently less valuable, but uh, a great story is a great story. And it doesn't matter, I think, to me, if that story is being told by Apple TV or Netflix or Barter Theater, as long as the storytelling is being taken care of and it's compelling and it's clear and it can be simple, but I think that's really interesting, and I think that's also why I feel like we need to lean into it, because it's the wild, wild west. That's never been true before. We didn't have the ability to compete. You needed, a huge broadcast studio. You needed professional equipment, cameras and DPs and all that stuff. And as someone who has started to lean into it just a little bit, it's more within reach than ever. The technology has become so consumer grade that we could do it if we tried.
Yeah, and especially it's funny, I hear that in my brain, like I am so tech resistant and technology suspicious, which is ironic because I have a career in audio production. But like I also hear that though, and what I like about the conversations we've had about Stageable is that like I can't quite wrap my brain around the conveyance of the live performance. You know what I mean? But what I can wrap my brain around is the democratization of philanthropy. Like that I find really, really interesting in really like I was having a conversation with somebody yesterday about watching actors who can't find their light. You know, when you're on stage and you have an actor who just they can never seem to find their light, and that is a failure to collaborate. It's not just an actor who can't find their light. It's an actor who refuses to collaborate with a lighting designer, right? Because what the lighting designer has done is not elastic, right? They're gone. They had to leave the theater 2 weeks ago. And if I refuse to find my light, that means I refuse to collaborate with a fellow storyteller. And I just thinking about like how we include audience in the collaborative process, going like my time at the ASC changed the way I think about audiences because they were no longer sitting out there in the dark. I could see them. They could sometimes reach out and touch me, right? They were right there. And like to include them in another level of the collaborative process that I can kind of wrap my brain around and understand. But especially with as more and more of the technology becomes more and more accessible and more easy to use, using it as a conveyor belt for philanthropy. I get excited about that for audiences, on their behalf.
Yeah. And I think it's a way to stay connected to people who are geographically not in that area. I mean, I think you need to do that, and that's a big part of community, right? Our geographic community, the people who are nearby. But there's always going to be people who were a part of that community and then move on, as in, they relocate. And in a technologically connected world, we can continue community when our physical presence is separated in ways we've never been able to do before. And I think leaning into that is another another good thing for us because, you know, it's a form of leverage. It allows, you know, I feel like you and I have maintained a relationship, you know, through having you on the podcast last year and now this year, and just having these FaceTimes. And, you know, I mentioned this, I had Vanessa Marasco of the American Shakespeare Center on last week. And, you know, we pointed out that, of course, it would be better to be sitting at a coffee table in a coffee shop and having a coffee with you in person. That would be a better experience. But the freedom with which we're able to so quickly connect with one another is a different kind of gift and a different kind of value. And the fact that we can now open up this conversation to anyone in the world that wants to participate is a different kind of leverage. You know, it's a different kind of value.
Yeah, it's like, to me, the idea of it's bringing it could bring the agency and the access that Patreon brings to an ensemble, like on the ensemble level, not just on the individual level. That's
Yeah, and then this is a newer iteration, a newer kind of thing that's starting to take form, which is there's also the potential for the ecosystem to benefit. So, you know, if we are able to get people to come on board and sign up for memberships, that maybe a portion of it is directed to that ensemble, and another portion is spread across the network, so that sort of support is more broad and helps everybody continue to succeed. And, you know, the other thing that is really important here for organizations is what you mentioned earlier, in that, you know, they were saying that their spring season is lighter on attendance. And what recurring monthly revenue does is it stabilizes your revenue, and you know exactly what's coming in every single month, which really helps with planning, especially, I would imagine, payroll, you know, your biggest line item on your budget. And so if you were able to capitalize on having, you know, a certain amount of support and relief every month, it would free up some of that oxygen in the budget to invest that money into things that could create more value for audiences.
yeah, certainly. Yeah, I see that. And like the hurdles, it's funny, my brain also jumps to hurdles, and like, how do you deal with this, how do you deal with that, like specifically like unions, how do you play with the union, how do you deal with this union versus that union? But like, I do think that there are solutions to those questions. He's getting the damn thing started first.
Yes.
Taking the first bite.
Yeah, and that's the thing, right? It's like, this happens to me all the time, Josh, where I look at something and I'm like, I don't understand how they do it, but they do. And I feel like I've run into this with several people in the arts where they're like, yeah, but what about the unions? And it's like, I don't know. We got to figure it out. I mean, you know, there are people doing movies. There are people doing commercials. There are people being posted online to social media, you know, every single day.
Yeah.
And it just, to me, it feels a little like we're just not willing to, you know, have the hard negotiation. We're not willing to, you know, go down the road of what would this look like, and how would we compensate actors and playwrights. And you know, now, none of that is to belittle the question, because it is a juggernaut of a
Yeah.
you know, IP, and those concerns are real, and we need to be careful as we proceed.
There is like, and I say this as a member of two separate unions, I often feel that the unions are an enemy. And I think that that's just such a casual, common part of our culture in a very anti-union America that we live in. that it's easy to forget that like their ability to succeed is just as dependent on my ability to is directly dependent on my ability to succeed, and that there are good reps, and you just have to have hard conversations.
Yeah. Yeah. And I also am a part of one of those unions, Actors Equity, and I often feel the same thing. I feel like this organization, which is meant to be my advocate, feels like the barrier that I have to always work through. And I think you're right. It isn't that way though. And we need to be vocal about that and say, you need to be my advocate. And we as actors need to band together. Everybody who's in the union needs to say, we believe that you are our advocate. So help us understand why this policy exists. Help us understand this, or let's change it.
Yeah, and it's also like it can be a great excuse to be lazy. I find in artists, like I speak for myself, and many artists I know, it's the temptation to just be lazy is very clear. And I can think of the amount of times that I have kind of bitched and moaned about the union or specific things, and what I didn't do was get on the phone and call my rep to ask them, and to deal with them directly. So it's just very often a very easy lion in the street, like, oh, it's insurmountable, as opposed to actually putting boots on the.
Yeah, and let me tell you, like when you do start trying to live stream and try to translate a live event from being solely in person to broadcasting it on YouTube or some other destination, Facebook Live or wherever, you're going to make mistakes. There's going to be some difficulty. There's going to be some uncomfortable realities and failures that happen as a necessary step in the learning process. And I think that's maybe another part of all of this for me is it's me standing up on my soapbox and saying, this is what we need to do. We got to learn. We got to make mistakes and then not stop because it was uncomfortable, but okay, let's do it a little bit better next time. How could we make this more entertaining? How could we make this a better thing to consume from people's living rooms? And we're not going to be able to do it like we should on the first try. It's going to take time.
Yeah, no, I hear that. But like going back to the thing that has always interested me about this idea and the conversations we've had is I find it really interesting, the idea of giving agency to audiences. Because I initially heard this idea as giving agency to artists, and it does exist. I think that's part of it. But I like the idea of bringing the audiences on board as collaborators, as more than just sit in the dark and be entertained collaborators. So I think that there's value in that. Yeah.
I mean, so here's something that I think about often, which is imagine if, pick a percentage, 15% of people who went and saw theater, classical music, a dance performance, even in the last year or the last 5 years would be even better. If only 10% of those people chose to support a specific organization monthly, how much money would we generate? No?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think if you go and look at the numbers, it's not insignificant. Even a small percentage of conversion into like, yeah, I do believe in this. And I think there's an untapped market of people out there who don't have, $5,000 to give to a theater, but who could absolutely and should absolutely give them $10 a month.
Yeah. Yeah.
And just put your vote behind somebody. Say, it's important to me that you exist.
Yeah. Yeah, especially in a time when so many theaters are closing their doors, to say that, no, this is important. Yeah.
I think the other thing that is important too is the financial transparency you mentioned earlier, because I think that's a big part of what gives people the confidence to either donate or, what we're talking about, a smaller sort of subscription or membership, is knowing that money is being utilized well, right?
Yeah.
That makes it feel a lot easier
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
fork
If
it
I
over.
could see, my $10 that I'm giving, this percentage is going here. This percentage is going here. This percentage is being used for X, Y, and Z. Yeah. As opposed to just like, I feel like I'm giving money to a black void that's just sucking it dry.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's where we can all get better as well, and this could be a tool for that too. Is a picture's worth 1,000 words, so you're letting the audience in. Hey, look, here's what your support was able to accomplish, and creating libraries of behind the scenes content and actual events that can be experienced from wherever your audience happens to be. And now the value proposition, it extends all the way throughout the year, and not just the one weekend a month I'm able to get out to your theater.
No, it's fun. When it takes me back kind of to what we were talking about earlier, talking about specifically the way Katie at this company values that kind of transparency, that like, it makes me think of, it was a conversation I watched. Christopher Nolan, the director, was talking about the way he works with artists. And it kind of comes down to that open communication is collaboration. Like, that is how you collaborate. He was using the example of like how he had learned to tell the truth to artists in particular, as opposed to like trying to couch what he was doing in a manipulative way. He uses the simple example of like getting an actor to move over to the window for the shot. And he was like, I can sit there and I can bullshit all day long about how, like, it's really about the actors, it's something in the past, the characters, needs to be here. And he said, when the reality is that's where the light is best. And we only have 5 minutes before we lose the light. So like he said, by opening that up and being honest, that engages his collaborator to be like, oh, I'm actually valued as part of this process for you to tell me the truth, for you to tell me, well, I need you here because I'm using this lens and the light is hitting you in this way. And that's what the product is going to be, as opposed to like, no, just stand there because I said so, or being manipulated into giving me the thing that I want. And I thought of that listening to the way this company talks about their boss and that kind of transparency. It's like, it's valuing you as an artist to engage in the process. And I think that there's opportunities here to be honest with audience members and to value them because conversation is collaboration, right? I'll bring you into this and I'll tell you the truth about what we're going to do with this season subscription and where it's going to be allocated and how it's going to look. That's rare. I would say that's almost non-existent.
I do think that, your mantra of wanting to see the resident ensemble return, that's something that I think could absolutely thrive with some sort of structure like Stageable, where you reach out and directly make a pitch to an audience and say, look, here's our group, it's these 10 people, and we're going to put on plays, and we're only going to be able to do as much as our audience will support and return. But I could see it, because it's like, I think a group of people like that who are motivated and who are smart could absolutely survive without a total administrative wing. Like, I think they could do it on their own. And
yeah, well, I mean, we see that, to be honest, we see that in streaming. I think of, look, when I go and hang out with my brother and his kids, they tune in at nighttime. They don't really watch TV shows. They watch Mr. Beast and what his ensemble of shenanigans are up to. They watch this specifically streaming family, and like they follow those people, not necessarily the product. They're interested in the people. It's fascinating modern times we live in, Benjamin. Fascinating.
Well, response to how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. I think we found a good place to put a pin in it, but I hope that I think one of the reasons this went by so quickly for me is we really started to, uncover some stuff and have some great back and forth. And I so appreciate about that when I have you on as a guest, and I would really love to have you on more frequently if you'd like. So I hope we can keep having conversations and finding paths forward.
Always love talking to you.
All right. Well, I appreciate it, Josh. Thanks for being a guest on the podcast, and we need to try and pick up where we left off, and we'll just find a different wormhole to go down.
Right.
All right,
perfect.
Brother. Well, thanks again. I'll see you soon.
See you. Peace.
And everybody, check out Barter Theater and the Three Musketeers.
Yes.
Check them out.